early evening news on BBC One with Jane Hill.
1 week after the tsunami disaster, nearly 2 million people are short of food. Aid gets through to some of those desperate for help in Indonesia. But a second day of flooding in Sri Lanka delays the arrival of supplies. And here, prayers are said across the country as the British death toll rises. Hello, good evening. A week after the tsunami devastated nations around the Indian Ocean, desperately needed aid is finally getting through. According to the United Nations, about 1.8 million people are short of food and about 5 million are homeless. Helicopters have begun dropping food parcels and medical supplies to a number of the worst affected areas. Indian Army soldiers have brought in the first relief to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, close to the epicenter of the earthquake which triggered the tsunami. In Sri Lanka, field hospitals and emergency shelters have been set up, and in Indonesia, which suffered the greatest loss of life, helicopters have flown in aid and medical help to the people living in the badly damaged province of Aceh. Live now to the provincial capital, Banda Aceh, and our correspondent Andrew Harding. Andrew.
Jane, good evening. Tonight here in Indonesia, this massive aid operation really is moving up a gear. You can feel it everywhere. Helicopters in the sky non-stop, cargo planes landing by the hour, and trucks racing along what roads there are left here. But still, this logistical nightmare, how to get the aid out to these inaccessible regions. Today, I took an aid flight out about 100 kilometers south of here to a region which bore the full force of that wave's fury. Now, you may find some of the images in this report disturbing.
Scrubbed off the map, a little town called Chelang. 2/3 of the population dead. And the survivors in a shocking state. We flew in with a team of doctors to a place that's been cut off from the outside world. Infections are spreading fast here, and there are week-old wounds to stitch.
The situation's really bad here. We're going to need a lot more drugs and equipment fast. The infections have got to a serious stage.
Rosmiati's 2-year-old is getting weaker by the day.
He got diarrhea. Diarrhea.
What do you think will happen here now? What will you do now?
Rencana ibu gimana selanjutnya?
Ayahnya nggak selamat, orang tua saya nggak ada, saya nggak tahu gimana.
I don't know, she says. I don't know what to do. Everyone else in the family is dead. Down by the shoreline, I found some new arrivals. Survivors who just walked 20 miles to this ruined town, hoping to find help. So far, it's still scarce. This is what we live on, said Supriyadi.
So this is the only water you have?
Yes, he said, milk from the coconuts, and now some rice to eat. That rice has just started arriving here, brought in by helicopter in fits and starts. It's a lifeline which many thousands of families are now utterly dependent on.
So a little aid is finally getting through to towns like Chelang. Here comes another helicopter with more. It's just about enough to keep the survivors alive. But still, you've got to wonder, what on earth is going to happen to places like this in the future? Is anyone really ever going to live here again?
Already, the few who can are leaving here fast. This afternoon, 14-year-old Ria was flown away, perhaps for good. The wave broke her arm and wiped out her entire family. One victim rescued, but thousands more left behind.
Jane, this problem of access is still the #1 headache for aid workers here. Now, my colleague Ben Brown reports from Banda Aceh's airport, where the whole relief operation is being coordinated, and where tonight, just a couple of hours ago, the very first consignment of British government aid just arrived.
Banda Aceh's little airport has suddenly become the hub for what is the biggest aid operation in history. Even so, it's still not enough and not fast enough. In fact, sometimes box loads of relief supplies sit on the runway for hours at a time, and the pace of this airlift can seem frustratingly slow. The planes that bring aid in take out injured survivors of the disaster and some of those made homeless. These people know that without more aid more quickly, the tsunami could yet claim new victims through the outbreak of diseases like typhoid and cholera. Tonight, the first plane load of British government relief supplies arrived here in Aceh. Some 50 tons of them. The RAF had to use the largest plane it has, a C-17. On board, food, water and heavy lifting gear donated by both the United Kingdom and Scandinavian countries who've lost so many of their people to the tsunami disaster. For the RAF crew, this was one of the most rewarding missions of their lives.
We feel very proud of our contribution today. We're certainly, as the Royal Air Force, very keen to get involved in the relief effort. We've brought about 50 tons of aid in today, and we hope to be now starting a continuous program of aid into the region.
Getting aid like this into the airport here is only half the story. Now it has to be distributed to the people who need it, and very fast indeed. But there are plenty of obstacles, long distances, impassable roads, fuel shortages and bureaucratic delays. Ben Brown, BBC News, Banda Aceh Airport.
Jane, this place is improving slowly. It feels like a very different city from the one I arrived in a few days ago. But still, tonight, many thousands of families still sleeping rough, still wondering where their next meal will come from and when and where they will ever have a place they can call home again. Jane.
Andrew Harding, many thanks. Nearly 130,000 people are now known to have died in the disaster. This afternoon, the Foreign Office said the number of British people killed had risen to 40. In Sri Lanka, the aid effort has been hampered by torrential rain. From Kalmanai in the east of the island, Jeremy Bowen sent this report.
It's easy to find the bodies the cleanup squads missed. You use your nose. More than 7,000 bodies have been found here, around Kalmunai on Sri Lanka's east coast. On the beach, the body of a boy of around 10 had just been washed up. Alakaya Sutukumar took charge. He buries every corpse he finds, around 450 so far, because he's looking for 21 members of his family. He hasn't found one of them. The people here, though, can't spend their time grieving. The monsoon rains have virtually cut them off from the rest of Sri Lanka. Water is still the enemy.
This devastated area that goes on for mile after mile along the Sri Lankan coast is now a massive health hazard. And it's not just dead bodies, though judging by the smell, there are still a few around here. It's all this filthy standing water. According to UNICEF, the biggest threat to life in Sri Lanka now are waterborne diseases.
But they're not waiting for foreign experts to solve their problems. Local people have been mobilized to clean up their own streets. The organization in this camp comes from Tamil Tiger separatists, normally undercover in this government-controlled area, but operating here with official permission. Abdul Hamid Ramis was doing well until he saw relief supplies for families arriving. His wife and 3 children are dead. Almost all the aid in this part of Sri Lanka has been brought in by private citizens. They've moved much faster than the government. It means that there's food for people who've lost everything. Only the Air Force can reach the most isolated areas, but they haven't got many helicopters and they can't fly in rainstorms. People here need so much. Not just food and clean water and medical aid, but long-term investment to rebuild their destroyed communities, which will be the biggest challenge of all. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, on the east coast of Sri Lanka.
The Indian military is stepping up its relief effort to the remote Andaman and Nicobar Islands, where thousands of people are thought to have died. On Nicobar alone, close to the epicenter of the earthquake, at least 10,000 people are still unaccounted for. Our correspondent Jonathan Charles is one of the first people to reach Car Nicobar since the earthquake, and he's just sent us this report.
Dead body, dead body.
Yet another body is located, yet another name to add to the long list of the dead. Car Nicobar Air Base was once the pride of the Indian military. Now it's nothing but rubble. More than 100 airmen and their families were killed here, as first the earthquake and then the surging sea took their toll. The runway is barely serviceable, but it's been patched up. Now the Indian Air Force is managing to land food and water, desperately needed by the survivors on this island.
The Air Force base was washed away. So it was very difficult, and in the present circumstances, what they did, it is commendable.
But for Malacca village, it's too late for aid. As the water came through here, it met little resistance. Only a shrine to Mahatma Gandhi is still standing. Villagers from here are amongst the 10,000 islanders thought to be either missing or dead. The highest point on this island is just 12 meters above sea level. When the water came ashore here, there was nowhere to run to. That's why so many people lost their lives. Those who did survive are deeply traumatized. Saira spends all day going from camp to camp, searching for her 3 missing children. She says she's most worried about her 2-year-old son and hopes he's being looked after somewhere. But not even neighbors from her village are optimistic. This island's mental scars match its physical ones. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Car Nicobar.
More than £1 billion in aid has now been pledged by governments and individuals across the world. Here, public donations have topped £16 million. Our Developing World correspondent David Loyne looks at how the aid agencies ensure that the money gets to where it's most needed quickly.
A week on and aid is on its way from Britain. It's an emotional time for workers who've given up their Christmas holiday.
Absolutely fantastic. It's a week of hard work for the emergencies team. We've seen all the pictures, we've heard everything. Now we're finally getting some aid up in the air and where it matters on the ground in Sri Lanka.
How much would you like to donate?
An unprecedented disaster matched by unprecedented giving. Central administration takes 1 penny in the pound, with costs at the agencies around 5 pence, leaving 94 pence in every pound for victims. The agencies negotiate with each other to avoid duplication on the ground, with some filling specialised roles. Oxfam, for example, are very good at providing clean water, while Merlin provide medical help. But getting aid out to the more remote places needs military assistance. Now, as well as 2 British warships, 2 French ships, including a helicopter carrier, are on their way from North Africa. The Indian Navy, the largest in the region, has been working in India and Sri Lanka, while Pakistan is sending a warship to Indonesia, and Singapore has offered its airfields and helicopters. But none of these have the capacity of the US fleet, whose helicopters are already helping Indonesia. The aircraft carrier USS Lincoln is leading the American military support, and even UN critics who had implied that America was trying to take over the aid effort are grateful now.
Those helicopters are worth their weight in gold now for us, because we have very good pledges, but it takes time to convert a pledge into assistance, but a helicopter can reach communities in no time.
But the 5 million people whose lives remain at risk need a coordinated effort on the ground, and that is just beginning. David Loyne, BBC News.
And prayers have been said for the victims of the earthquake at churches across the country, including at Liverpool's Roman Catholic Cathedral. Church leaders have acknowledged that the disaster could test the faith of many people. Other news now, and train fares went up by an average of 4% today. The operators say the extra money will be used to improve the rail network, but passenger groups say they want to see things improve before any price rises.
Another year, another fare increase. Rail companies now routinely raise ticket prices by more than the rate of inflation. Passengers at London Euston today and across Britain are footing the bill for the long and expensive job of improving rail services.
Sometimes you can't get a seat in the main part of the carriage. So, yeah, I'm not that impressed, and very unhappy to hear that the fares are going up again.
Obviously, because it's private companies, they have to make a profit, I assume. Can't afford to run at a loss.
The above-inflation increases an average of 4% for season tickets and saver fares. Other fares rise by up to 7% for some Silverlink tickets between Birmingham and London. Walk-on fares bought on the day of travel broadly attract the highest rises. The rail companies say they're investing in new trains, better security and upgrading stations. The rail industry is something which eats up investment every day of every year. Passenger groups say above-inflation increases are testing the patience of commuters.
It's fine charging more if the companies are delivering improved standards for everybody, but the reality is that those improved standards are not yet being delivered.
Rail companies say they are improving, but this new year won't be the last time fares rise by more than the rate of inflation. Howell Jones, BBC News.
22 people have been killed in a suicide bomb attack on a bus carrying Iraqi National Guardsmen. 2 bombers blew up a vehicle packed with explosives near a US military base in the Sunni Triangle, where loyalty to Saddam Hussein is still strong. In the cricket, England enjoyed mixed fortunes on the first day of the 3rd Test against South Africa. After losing the toss in Cape Town, England restricted the hosts to 247 for 4. Ashley Giles, the most successful bowler, with 2 wickets. But they've yet to dismiss South Africa's best batsman, Jack Kallis. He finished the day on 81 not out. Well, that's it for now. There are updates throughout the evening on BBC News 24, and there'll be an extended bulletin here on BBC One at 10:30. Now it's time to join our news teams across the UK.